Introducing Dan Cole, the National Account Manager of SafeDefend. Today, Dan will talk about SafeDefend, the personnel protection and shelter-in-place systems for your school safety system to protect against intruders and threats.
Appreciate it. Appreciate the introduction. A little bit about me. I've had a 31-year career serving schools. I managed for a company called Life Touch. I did school portraits and published yearbooks. And during that career, I had a parallel career in volunteer fire and EMS. So everywhere I lived, whether it was Salina, Garden City, Kansas, Columbia, Missouri, I always had a dual purpose, serving the community and then, of course, taking care of my business with Life Touch. Currently, I am a rescue technician for Missouri Task Force 1, which is one of the urban search and rescue teams in the system of 28. So when I've responded in on mass casualty events, the first thing that I notice is the folks that are in the community are the true first responders. We know your sheriff and your law enforcement and your fire EMS guys are going to show up. But truly, it's the people on the ground when the incident takes place who are our first responders. So when I start talking about some of this, it really impacted me as I was in the schools every day, saw several incidents, and I realized what we charge our teachers with, our staff in the schools. When this system was developed after the Sandy Hook school incident, it was developed by a school principal that sat down with his safety team and tried to ask what could they do different. In his building in Johnson County, Kansas, out in DeSoto, they had everything they had in Newtown, Connecticut. They had perimeter security, they had camera systems, and they had environmental design. It took everybody through the office. Still, he realized everything that they had in that school, and nothing would have made a difference. So he started talking with some risk assessment experts, some law enforcement, and some administrators. And they realized that there were 3 unique problems to every school incident. These things are taking place inside the building. So what are we doing to help prepare the staff in the building to protect themselves? Second thing is we need to get law enforcement there faster. And the third thing is we need to figure out how to protect ourselves while we're waiting for law enforcement and EMS to get there. So that's where this system came about. And I've got a little slide here that has a video in it. It kind of brings us right to ground zero. It's about 1 minute and 20 seconds. So how many of you are teachers? Been in the classroom? Any of you? We have some law enforcement, of course. How about any fire or EMS? If you think about what it would be like in a classroom to be a teacher or a para or even a student, put yourself in the shoes of this lady that's on this interview here.
As we have said all day, we have met people who remind us what teachers do, how much they care, even in the face of terror. And I sat down with a first grade teacher at that school, Kaitlin Roig. She heard gunfire, large windows exposed her classroom, so she managed to rush 15 small children into a tiny bathroom to try to save their lives.
I put one of my students on top of the toilet dispenser. I just knew we had to get in there. I was just telling them it's going to be okay. You're going to be all right. I had pulled a bookshelf before I closed the door in front of it. So it was we were completely barricaded in. I turned the lights off.
Did you tell them to be quiet? Did you worry about one of them?
No, I told them to be quiet. I told them we had to be absolutely quiet because I was just so afraid that if he did come in and then he would hear us and then he would maybe just start shooting the door. So I said, no, we just have to be absolutely quiet. And I said, there are bad guys out there now. We need to wait for the good guys. They're coming again. I wanted us to be okay.
The sad thing about that is that could be any classroom in any school in the country. It could be down this hallway. Are we prepared for somebody to come in the building and act out against our staff and students? A couple of the things that I want to talk to you today. Our objective, I want to talk about the likelihood of an armed crisis event. I wanted to share a little bit with you about where a lethal threat is going to come from. We're going to talk about some vulnerabilities to the armed intruder. And it's not just an active shooter anymore. There's long blades and there's all kinds of weapons that can be used in these events. We'll talk about a shift in expert opinion on training and non-lethal versus lethal. How can we leverage some of what we know to give our staff some advantages without arming them. Talk about teachers as first responders is what I mentioned earlier, and how do we empower staff to deal with a crisis while we're waiting for the good guys to get there. I've got some opportunity to answer your questions, but feel free as I go through to ask a question, because I might be on a subject that's really near and dear to your heart, and I might have a simple answer, or I might be able to at least get an answer and get back to you on it. Then I'm going to talk to you about how we have exceeded expectations everywhere where we've put this system in. It's pretty rare when you have an in-service in a school where your staff fill out the form at the end, let alone fill it out and are positive about it. We have had every one of the trainings we've gone to, 100% of the staff fill it out, and overwhelmingly it's positive with what we bring to the table and what we share with them when we do an install in this system. We're talking about school safety and some of the things that take place inside schools. I need to ground us so we know where our baseline is. So this 0 represents a feature in school safety that everybody should be able to recognize when I give a little bit of hint. In the last 50 years, this represents the number of casualties in fires. So 0 casualties in fires in our public schools in the last 50 years. Since we're talking about that same line, what do you think this 19 represents? Casualties and weather-related events. This is in the last 40 years. Now, this is an interactive part of the deal. Why do you suppose these two numbers are so low? We drill. We practice. Anytime there's been a major incident, we've reviewed. We've done what we call a hot wash. We understand what went wrong. How could we make it better? We've strengthened our buildings. We've done things to the windows to make them storm resistant. On the fire side, we've done things to make the materials burn differently. If they burn at all, give off different fumes, gases, and the suppression systems. But the interesting thing about this, the cost of any new building that you go into is anywhere between 18 to 20% is directly related to these two initiatives. So if you have a $10 million building, you have close to $2 million going into supporting one of these two initiatives. That's why these numbers are so low, in addition to the training and the drills and everything that we go through. Most of the information that we put together that supports the SafeDefend system came from the FBI's active shooter report, and this was a 12-year span of time between 2000 through 2012. It came out in 2013. 237 represents the number of casualties in active shooting events in our educational facilities in that 12-year period of time. So what that tells us is you're far more likely to be involved in a gun-related incident in your career than you are in a fire or a weather-related incident. 60%. This is a number that represents the number of events that end before law enforcement arrive. Most events are done within 8 minutes. Most of the killing is done within the first 3 minutes. Law enforcement average response time is 12 minutes on a national average. If you're fortunate enough to have your law enforcement across the street, your time's greatly reduced, but if they're out on a call or if they're somewhere else, you've just got real life things that happen. Some of the challenges that we faced are there's so many folks in these buildings that are unprotected and they're unaware. What do you think this 14 represents? This is the number of casualties that happen in any of these events when we're just waiting for law enforcement to arrive. That means there's no notification system. There's no way to let folks know that there's an event going on in the building, and nobody's able to take any action. You're going to have 14 casualties on average without a system in your building. What do you think that number represents? That's if anybody in a building can take some action. If there's a way to get folks aware that they've got danger in the building, somebody confronts the person. If we can get that mindset, we're going to change the outcome of these events dramatically. Here's an interesting thing. Attorney General Holder made the comment that over the 4-year period of time after this report came out, there was a 150% increase in those numbers. So you take that 237, add 150% to that, that's your true number. Who's putting schools at risk? This one was pretty interesting to me. It's no doubt we understand that 76% of those are from troubled students, 4% are from current or former employees, 4% are from non-employees but have a relationship with somebody in the building. Then we have 16% that just come in off the street. That tells us that 84%, which is the biggest threat, they come right through our doors. They're in our buildings. They belong here. They're folks that we know. And I can guarantee you that other 16% know how to smile well enough to get inside your building, act as though they know somebody, and then start whatever damage that they've got in mind. So as we talk about this, and we talk about these things taking place inside the building, what are some of the precautions that we have in place, not necessarily here, but in most schools across the country? Anybody have any idea what most schools are up to? Video. Access control systems, metal detectors. There's a whole line of things that are being added to schools after the fact to try to reduce these numbers. But every single event that has happened since 2000 has had one or more of these things in place. So what we know is access control systems, camera systems, metal detectors, they all have a purpose. It's not wasted money, but they are not affecting the outcome of these events, and they're definitely not reducing the casualty count. That's why the group, when they got together and started working with the threat assessments teams, they realized that we need to be able to protect the staff inside the building. Challenges, according to the experts, were pretty simple to point out, but a lot of times staff and students haven't had any training. Sometimes it's outdated, sometimes it's too aggressive. On the notification side, if we're relying on an intercom or if we're relying on that 911 call, phone applications or radios, they're all take time and fine motor skills. There's been a lot of exercises done where they've done live fire events and done training scenarios. And guess what? The first thing is that we forget to do under pressure when the bad guy's breathing down on us. We forget to call the good guys. I mean, we engage the person, we do what we do, and sometimes there's precious 3 to 5 minutes are gone before anybody even picks a phone up to call 911 and get the sheriff and law enforcement on the way. There's this thing called duty to warn. We need to make sure we're taking care of getting the building evacuated if possible and or locked down. School safety teams, building administrators, and even other schools in the areas need to be made aware when there's an incident in a building in their area. On a response time, you can't have an effective staff response unless you have real-time information and they're given some options. It's just been quite recently that run, hide, fight has been accepted in a lot of schools. It used to be if we had an incident, we get on the intercom and you lock your classroom down and you just stay there. Hope law enforcement gets there in time. There's been a lot of rethinking that and a lot of studies that show the safest place to be when somebody is got a weapon is where? Somewhere else. So this is where we're at now. We're rethinking some of this. Some of the challenges on responses are staff are on their own, they're unaware, and they're defenseless. If you don't know something's coming down your hallway, you have no idea until it steps in your classroom. Law enforcement need direct access to the buildings, and they need good information. We have found in a lot of places that have their buildings locked or they do a hard lockdown, they've not made provision for law enforcement to have keys or fobs or something to get themselves in. The bad guy's already in the building, so we're helping them think through that. Why lock your building down if the bad guy's in the building? If you have the opportunity to have that building open, let law enforcement come and go when you know the bad guy's in there, you're going to probably have a better option of getting your help where it's needed faster. Now, if the bad guy's in the building next to you, you lock your building down. It's just a way to rethink some of this through, and that's where some of these challenges come through, that the experts started breaking things down. Now, the system I'm going to show you today that was developed had a couple challenges. We had to make sure that school insurance guidelines would accept it, and we had to make sure that law enforcement guidelines would approve it. So we've got both people involved in the development of this product. On the prepare side, what we've understood is the training needs to be practical, not tactical. Most staff like to understand how an event will escalate, but they don't want to be scared into thinking it's going to happen by everybody that walks through the door or every student that sits down in the classroom. So our training is more of a mental exercise where we have practical application with the tools that we provide. We don't fire live rounds, noisemakers, or anything like that. That's a whole different scenario that needs to be done in a controlled environment, not necessarily the way we approach it. What we want to do is enhance the current level of preparedness you already have. If you've had some run, hide, fight, we'll give you information on how this system complements that. If you've not had that level of training, we start at the very basic level. The interesting thing is where we put this system in, and they do quarterly drills, each quarter has a little bit more information. So everybody gets more comfortable. So when the system's been in a year or longer, everybody understands it's just like the fire drill. When the fire drill goes off, you have protocol that you follow, and you have guidelines that you want to achieve. But it gives you freedom to go ahead and act according to the circumstances around you. On the notification side, duty to warn and standard of care, there are two things that schools and public businesses really need to be aware of. If we can't notify folks within our building that we've got something going on, we are held liable for that. That's why legislation has made it so your fire protection and your storm warning siren systems are so well covered. You look in here, there's 4 red boxes that indicate when we got a fire. It's that important they legislated it. That's why we're clear down to 0 on that. We understand when we've got a situation and we know how to respond to it. What we've done is we've taken this and put in a system that helps you notify folks when you've got an intruder in the building. We use strobes and sirens that instantly go off, and they go off for 1 minute only. We want the good guys coming in not to have to try to gather information over a screaming siren. Siren strobes go off for 1 minute. Staff immediately clear the hallway, lock their doors, and then we give them some more information. We share with them, if they have a phone in the room, a cell phone, we send a text message to them. If they don't have that, they can check their email. Both of those are almost instant. When the system's activated, it shoves an email and it shoves a text out. That gives them, probably within the first 15 to 30 seconds, the opportunity to understand if this is in their hallway or if this is in another building. It lets them make decisions based on real-time information. We also place that 911 call. But imagine if you two gentlemen got a text and it said, active lockdown, 2nd floor, high school. You would know within 5 seconds what they've got going on at the high school. Would that help in your response tactics? How you would approach the building and all those things? What we have found out by doing this, we're saving 3 to 5 minutes on law enforcement response. If somebody was to place a 911 call right now, does anybody have any idea by the time you dial, it rings, gets answered, they vet the call, and they dispatch, how long it takes for radio dispatch to go out on the average call? Law enforcement guys can help me out. It's an average of 3+ minutes. So if I was to dial right now, it'd take 3 minutes before the good guys got the radio message. So what we've done is we've given them the ability to have it at the same time the teachers have it. So if they're in town, they can get on the radio and they can say, emergency traffic, sheriff, we need units to go to, second floor of the high school science room. On this notification, what we're making sure is your law enforcement, your administrator in all the buildings, and the folks that are in danger, they know the location. You can start responding accordingly. On the protection side, we make sure that the staff are trained and empowered and equipped. Did you know that in a stabbing or a shooting incident, blood loss is the leading cause of death? 90% of the deaths associated with a shooting victim or stabbing victim are blood loss. If you know you've been shot or you know you've been stabbed, if you can get some assistance in bleeding control, chances are you will survive. Now, that's a known fact. We have not done enough to make that information available to the folks on the front lines, and we haven't given them the tools. That's where this system, in our training, we teach bleeding control, and in the system we have a tourniquet and we have some quick clot on a sponge. That is an application we teach them how to use. Actual real-time information will give your staff and your law enforcement the ability to make good decisions. I talked about that response time. At this point, if somebody calls 911, you really don't know what you've got and where you're coming in, so law enforcement might come in from a couple different directions. But if they know where they're at, if they know it's in the gym, if they know it's in the library, if they know where it's at, they'll save a lot of time getting where they've got to go. As well, if I'm a teacher and I hear a little bit of noise but I can't identify what it is, all of a sudden then the strobes and sirens start going off. I lock my door and I start going through the system. Then I get the text or the email. If I'm not in the hot zone, I can take my children and leave the building. I can get out of line of sight of the building. That's an option. Now, if I'm in the hot zone, I'm definitely not going to leave the building because this noise that I heard is identified now. It's a bad guy. I'm going to open my box. I'm going to get my tools out. I'm going to protect my children. So those are some options we hadn't had before until we've had this system. I'm going to go ahead, and this next slide is going to give you a real quick description and a demo of what this system does.
When the system is activated, staff and employees have access to tools recommended by threat assessment experts, law enforcement, and emergency responders, which will help them escape, protect, or respond to a trauma. Emergency strobes are placed throughout the building and on exterior doors, immediately alerting staff that a crisis is taking place. With the swipe of the finger, the system is activated, immediately notifying law enforcement, staff, and district personnel of a crisis down to the room number. This allows everyone to have the information they need to effectively respond to a crisis.
So some of the things that we talked about again were when an event occurs in one of your buildings, how do you let everybody know what's going on? So currently, if we're relying on the systems you have, is it an intercom or?
We can call in from a cell phone and get on our speaker system to
Okay.
notify everybody, or we can do it from the offices, depending on what.
The system was developed knowing that a lot of the time when you have an incident like this occur in your building, the folks that are usually at the front end of this are those who need to get the warning out. If somebody steps into the front office, represents a direct threat with a weapon, a lot of times we, as protectors, will step around the counter and we'll confront the person ourselves. If we can subdue the person and get the situation under control, we've done a great service to everybody. However, if we become a victim, we've done nothing to help anybody else in the building. We've got some choices to make. We need to get that 911 call made. We need to get the good guys here faster. They bring control to chaos. We also need to get everybody else in the building notified. What is a teacher's biggest fear in one of these incidents? What we've understood their biggest fear is not knowing it's even going on. Being in your classroom, working with your students, hearing a little chaos, and then all of a sudden somebody's at the door and they come in and they wreak havoc on you and your students. So with this system, if I'm in the front office or if I'm wherever one of these boxes are and I'm directly threatened, I've got those three choices. So instead of just taking a bad guy on or trying to hide to make my 911 call or trying to find the intercom system, swipe my finger, and now I can address the bad guy, or I can hide.
Disarmed. Not ready to arm.
But what I've done is I have initiated strobes and sirens in the hallway, so anybody in the hallway is going to either evacuate the building or seek cover in a classroom, and they're going to lock the door. 911 has been called, but the really cool thing is I just went ahead and sent a text message to anybody within the district or any law enforcement within your zone that has the ability to receive a text message. So I'm dealing with the crisis by either confronting the person or I'm hiding. But the cool thing is I've got everybody else notified that they need to protect themselves, and I got the good guys coming. So I clicked this little button here to let you know what 3 minutes is like. So as I'm chatting, I'm dealing with the situation. I know the good guys are coming. So already what we've done is we've reduced the number of folks that are targets. Most often, psychologists will tell you when somebody's confronted with a siren, if they present a weapon, you set sirens off, a lot of times they will leave your building. They will evacuate. They know the jig is up. Good guys are coming. If we can do that, it's a win-win situation. If they've already started the process of hurting people, we've got the good guys coming, and we've reduced the number of potential victims by getting them out of the hallway and locking doors. Inside this box, we've talked about prepare, notify, protect. We've already prepared you with training. We've already got the notification out. Now, what do we have here to protect you? There's a couple things that we have that are just inside this box. Each one has a little bit different weight to it, I guess you'd say. One of the most critical components that we have is if I'm in the classroom and this is going on somewhere else, I'm going to lock my door, I'm going to shut my lights off, and I'm going to tell my students to get out of line of sight of the door. We're going to be pretty quiet. If the chaos ends, the bad guy leaves, or the good guys get there and take care of the situation, we're just going to stay where we are until law enforcement comes and gets us. The bad guy's determined to come down the hallway and start breaking in doors if possible and coming in. Each one of these doors that we look at in our schools usually has glass that's available to the bad guy. First you got to know how to close it. That was the system to let you know that's the first that your law enforcement heard that you even had a problem, because that was the 911 call that just went in. So what we do now is I go ahead, and if I'm a teacher, I lock my door, kids around the corner, I shut my lights off, and I do something as simple as if somebody starts beating on the door they want in, I have a strobe that I will just place at the door, and I'll walk away from it. Now I've got some options. The bad guy thinks he's going to bust that glass and get in just by reaching through. I've got a can of gel pepper spray that I can discharge from 15 to 18 feet away if he presents his face. Or I have a window break that I can evacuate if I don't have an egress here. Or I can teach my staff to stand next to the door, and when he sticks his arm in, all I'm going to do is give him an option to come down on his wrists. If you can disarm or break the bones, the soft bones in somebody's arm that's holding a weapon, they can't function with that weapon. As a classroom teacher, all I've done, protected my students in a non-lethal force. Bad guys back out in the hallway. Good guys are coming. He's not a threat to my kids. So what this system has basically done on the notify and protect, good guys are coming, and we've made sure that the teachers have some options in the classroom. It's pretty simple. We don't ask teachers to go out in the hallway and take a bad guy on, but we do give them some options in case they are in the classroom and they need some support, and their help's 6 to 10 minutes away. Does anybody have any questions on this response system, how we do it? Yeah.
The box, when you set that off,
Yeah.
is that, I should, our local law enforcement will know where that box is at?
Correct. Yeah, each one of the units is listed in the system with a location. So if you've got a zone protection where you've got 3 or 4 in the building, we'll know where it's placed. So when it's activated, this one right now, if it was assigned to the library, it would say elementary library. So as responding officers, you know exactly where to go. What would be my quickest route? What could I do to get between them and other students? So if it was in here, chances are they'd come in from this door to keep the bad guy from heading to the high school. I mean, there's just a lot of things law enforcement think through on their arrival if they have good information.
So with that, if the library is activated, and then across the hall, you know, they're all starting to see
Right.
where it's at. If, you know, if I'm a teacher, I'm going to be a little bit worried. You know, I know that I'm in the hot zone or whatever.
Right.
I'm going to open and activate. Is that going to send out another text message to everybody?
The system is a smart system, so when one box is open, we encourage everybody else to open their box. I turned that on so you guys would hear my text. Sorry about that. So the system is a smart system, so when this box is activated, everybody else is to go to theirs and open it. And they take their tools out that they feel that they might need, put them in their pockets, respond accordingly. First thing to do is get that door locked. If you have students that you're in your room, you get them out of sight of the glass. Then you prepare. You guys have any response on the law side? What your thought is on the notification component or the training? When we've done training before, we've made sure that law enforcement has a very active role in that. We find out what your previous training has consisted of, and we find out really the direction you'd like to have us lead this training. So we give you counsel. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Two young police officers and a training and stuff.
Right.
Doing a lot of work with schools. So, but we're just a small part of it. You know, the rest of them are miles away that they didn't respond. So.
We've done several things in the communities. We put it in the Oskaloosa area, Sublette, which is Haskell County. There's a lot of law enforcement within the region that are maybe you've got off-duty trooper, somebody that lives in the area, or other law enforcement trained folks. They've asked to be put on that alert system so they can get the information and respond accordingly to assist. Because if you do have somebody that happens to be a road trooper, lives in town, and they're off-duty, sometimes they might be somebody that's first in and really assists to take this under control before there's a lot more damage. Training, notification, and then giving teachers options to use some of these tools instead of what they've had in the past is making a big difference.
So do you put one of these systems in every room, or how do you do that?
System is created to be in each workspace, and it's a networked system. Let me go ahead and I'll click through this next slide for you. So the system is managed at the building level, which since you have a city block, you'd only need one communication system. And since you have a network that we call a flat network, it just sees one network, even though you've got multiple buildings. So you'd have one communication system managed at the building level. It's expandable and can be relocated. So if you're not able to put one in each workspace, if you want this ability to have this communication system immediately, you can put in what we call a zone system, which would be the warning equipment in the hallways, the communication equipment in your network, and then a few of these boxes in strategic locations. So it'd give you a zone protection. Then you can just plug and play. You can add other units into the system as you have the capital or the budget to do so. It's false alarm and tamper resistant. These boxes are biometric. Each one of these units holds 30 fingerprints. So the staff in that area would be checked off on this box. We have had a lot of schools that have gone with the panic buttons and the fobs. A lot of them are scrapping it because if they get a false alarm, it incites panic. You don't know where that person is that set that off. You don't know where the button was set off. And usually when it's a false alarm, law enforcement starts slowing down their response and only sending one unit, and it's just complicated.
So does this run off the internet or wireless?
This system drops in off of a Cat 5 drop. So we would position this wherever we needed to, and then it just runs through their network system.
It's hardwired.
Correct. Each safety box is location specific, as I mentioned. The communication system, which is real similar to what your fire communication component is, the programming and install for that system is between $8,000 to $10,000. Additional buildings, if they're on the flat network, it's 50% off. But what I figured between your buildings and the way they're located, you still fall underneath that top 8 to 10. The warning equipment that I spoke about, strobes and sirens in your hallways to be sufficient, it's $1,500 to $3,000. You guys fall in that lower end of that because your buildings are small. A building like this would take 3 siren strobes on the inside and 4 on the outside. We want to have one facing each direction on the outside of the building in case we have teachers and students on the playground. Got a bad guy inside, you don't want people coming back in the building. We suggest those hallways and the commons and on the outside approaches. And the safety boxes, which are equipped with the communication system and everything that you see here, they're $650 a box. The only fee that there is after the fact is an annual communication system management fee, which is how we control the emails and the texts, and we communicate with 911. Sorry for the coughing fit. At least I'm not on the campaign trail. As you guys think about school safety and what you have in place, do you see some direct benefits in getting the good guys here quicker and getting your hallways cleared? Have you ever seen a system like this? When we start thinking about cameras, locking our doors and all those things, they make us feel safer. Again, experts are telling us they're doing nothing to protect the classroom teacher and the students inside. Best way to do that is give them good warning, get their doors locked, get the good guys here faster.
For more information, check out the website at SafeDefend.com. Link in the description. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more videos.